Hi, my name is Cheryl and I am a crafty little chickie. Today I am going to show you the tutorial for my Star Wars Ewok toque design. So first of all, I will go through the yarn that I am using. The main color is Red Heart Super Saver in Carrot. I used just over one skein of this, so unfortunately you will need to buy the second skein. But it's a great color. It shows up really well, so it'll be good for lots of different projects. Alright, so the accent color is Bernat Super Saver, and the color is Taupe Heather. Not sure if the camera is going to focus on that, but it is called Taupe Heather. I will only use just a little bit of it. It's just the trimming and a bit of a design on the top. And that's about it in regards to the trim color with this that will be used. It's very minimal. The third color, or third yarn that I'm using, is this. And I use it for making the ears look furry. I use the majority of the ears in this color, the Taupe Heather, but then I attach this bit on top, just to make it look like fuzzy, furry ears. And the type of yarn that this is Red Heart Foxy, and it is 8117 or brown. Alright, so those are the colors. And also for this last yarn here, this is the only one that I bought for this, and I've made 2 toques out of it, so use very little bit of it just to cover the ear. So this will last you for a long time if this is the only thing you're using it for. Alright, so we can put our colors away, and I will show you the tools that I use to make this toque. Alright, so first things first, of course, you need a crochet hook. If you're going to want to do any crocheting, you're going to need a crochet hook. Alright, and the size is 5 or H. And of course, scissors. I use a measuring tape for fabric. The reason why is because I usually get my clients to measure around the heads just above the ears, and also from the top of the head down to the eyebrows. I make mostly kids' toques, so some kids just have bigger heads than others at different ages, and I like to just make sure that they are getting the toque that will fit them. And if it doesn't, then I made a mistake. But it has never happened that a toque has not fit if I've received measurements for the head. So that's one good thing to always use for that. And of course, you'll need a yarn needle. Mine is not a sharpened yarn needle, it's just a dull edge. And the last thing, you will need a stitch marker. I use a bobby pin. I find it incredibly easy to use this style for a stitch marker. I've tried other stitch markers where you kind of have to hook it around and close them. It's just a lot of work, and I find they hook on the yarn, and I find them frustrating. These bobby pins, easiest by far. As long as they've got the 2 little rubber pieces on the end there, they work fantastic. So yeah, those are the tools that you will need to make this toque. This tutorial is for an age 5-year-old child, and I stitch fairly tight, so if you are looser or tighter than I am in regards to your crocheting, it's going to of course change the size a little bit. But if you're going to want to change the size for a different age group, right now this is the only pattern size I have is for a 5-year-old. If you make it bigger, obviously you're going to have to adjust for the extra stitches on the side of the toque, the one that's on either side of the face, and also on the neck area. I do some increase and decrease stitches there. So if you're making the toque bigger, just make sure you compensate for that for where you're adding your increase and decrease stitches. If you're comfortable with crocheting, that's maybe something that would be no problem for you, but if it does kind of throw you for a loop and you want to make a bigger one, definitely feel free to give a comment in the comment section below, and I will do my very best to help you figure it out. Alright, let's get started. Okay, so I said earlier that we are using Red Heart in the color of Carrot. Alright, so I start all my toques using a magic circle. If you're not familiar with how that works, it's basically done so that there's no hole when you do single crochets all into one stitch. So there's no hole in the center, which would be the top of the toque. So this is a magic circle. Leave yourself quite a bit of a tail. And then you want to drape it over your pointer finger. Keep your two middle fingers together and wrap it around those middle fingers twice. And then you're going to bring the two pieces together and you're going to hold them with your thumb and your pinky. So it looks basically like that. And then you're going to take your crochet hook and you're going to go in between your two middle fingers underneath the yarn, and then you're going to go back here and you're going to yarn over from this over here. Yarn over and pull through both of the strings, and then you're going to yarn over again and pull through again. So it's basically a chain on the top there. You can pull your fingers out and let the magic circle go. So you'll have your yarn going back to your yarn ball. You'll have your magic circle, which will have one loop on your hook, and you also have the tail. Alright, so we're going to be doing 10 single crochets into the magic circle. If you're not familiar with what a single crochet is, I will show you right now. So what you do with one hook on your, one loop on your hook, you go through the magic circle and you yarn over and you pull that piece through the magic circle, you yarn over again and pull it through both loops. That is one single crochet. We need 10 in this loop. In this magic circle. So we're going to do it again. We go through the magic circle, yarn over, pull through, and then yarn over again, and pull through both loops. Alright, so we need 8 more. So this is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. You want to stretch out the loop quite a bit because you're going to let your hook out of it. What I like to do is I always like to double count my stitches. And here you can see stitches. They're all the little V's. I'm not sure if you can see the V's there. That's each one stitch. So we start here, we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 stitches. So we've got the right amount of stitches. You pull it back over this way, and there's going to be 2 pieces of yarn on the top, and then one tail. The tail very often wants to go in between those two these 2 pieces of yarn. I like to pull that out. It tends to get tangled in with those 2 then, and sometimes it doesn't pull as tight as it should then. So I pull that off just so it goes off to the side. And then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to pull one of the strings. It's either the front or the back. It usually tends to be the front for me, but you'll find out which one it is. You want to hold on to your work with your thumb and your 4 fingers, or for your first 2 fingers, and then you pull on with your right finger, or with your right hand, you pull on the string. And it will start to pull through, and it will tighten the circle. So if you look now, it's very tight. Put a little bit harder, and there you are. So now you're going to have to go to your tail, and you want to pull that piece. Again, hold on to your work tightly so it doesn't flip away from you. You tighten it, it's going to pull that loop that you just pulled through the circle and back out again. And then you'll see it's a very, very tight round in there. Alright, so you stick your hook back in the loop and you tighten it up. Always make sure your tail goes to the back. In the beginning it doesn't always want to. Right? And you want to make a single crochet into your first stitch of this first round, because you finished the first round, now you're starting the second round by connecting it. So to make sure, sometimes it's hard to tell. I believe it's this stitch right here, but I always like to count back just in case. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Yes, it is this one right here. If you can see the V right there. Okay, so let's go in here. This is the most awkward stitch out of every single stitch in this toque. It gets a little awkward to try to get it in there. So you want to go underneath that V there, and you're going to come through the back there. You yarn over, pull through, and then you pull through, yarn over and pull through both. So that is your first stitch on your second round. So what you're going to do is you're going to transfer the hook over to your left hand and still holding your work, and you're going to get your bobby pin or whatever you use as a stitch marker, and you're going to put it in over the top 2 loops right there. There you are. So you can transfer the hook back to your right hand. So you're ready to start the second round. So you've done the first stitch already, and what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to do 2 single crochets in each of the stitches around. So we're going to go from 10 stitches to 20 stitches in this round. So we did 1 already. We're going to have to go back into that same stitch and pull it through, and there's your second single crochet. So you're going to want to do that for each of the stitches all the way around. So we're going to go 2, 3, 4, wait a second, no, that's not correct. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, so this is the 5th stitch now that I just did. Sorry, wrong counting. So 5 and 6 go into this stitch here. 5 and 6, and then 7 and 8 in the next stitch. 9 and 10 in the next stitch. 11 and 12 in the next stitch. 13 and 14 in the next stitch. And this is where the stitch marker kind of gets in the way sometimes. You either just pull it forward or pull it back. I tend to pull it forward at this point. So 15 and 16. This stitch can be sometimes a little hard to see the stitches, especially the darker yarn you use, the harder it is to find sometimes, is what I've found. And 17 and 18 in this stitch. And 19 and 20 in the final stitch. Alright, so you have finished your second round. Alright, so now to start your third round. You have your stitch marker here. You're going to push it out, put it down just for now, and do a single crochet into that stitch. As soon as it's done, of course you want to put your stitch marker back in. And there you are. Get your hook back in your right hand. And for this third round, we're going to do 1 single crochet around every stitch. So again, it's just going to be 20 stitches. We're going to remain the same amount in stitches. We're halfway done at 10. I've got 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. Okay, so your third row is complete. And then for your fourth row is another row of increase. You increase every second round until you no longer need to increase in this pattern. But the increase is, you'll get the pattern as it goes along how you're going to increase. But this increase round, of course, you take your marker stitch out and you put one single crochet into that stitch where your marker was, and then of course replace your stitch right away. Alright, so then what we're going to do in this round to increase, we're going to do one single crochet in the first stitch, and then the second stitch you do 2 single crochets. And that's going to remain the pattern all the way around. 1 single crochet, 2 single crochets. Alright, so we've done 1 in this one, so in the next one we're going to have to do 2 single crochets. 1, and then 2 of them, and then 1, and then 2 of them, and then 1, and then 2 of them, and then 1, and then 2 of them, one, and 2 of them, and 1, and 2 of them, 1, and 2 of them, then 1, then 2 of them, 1, and then in the last one, 2 of them. Your last stitch will always be an increase. When you're doing an increase round, that last stitch will always be a double. Alright, so then you've done your 1, 2, 3, 4th row. So then again, 5th row again, every other row we don't increase. So there's going to still be 1 single crochet in each of the stitches around. Take your marker out. Put it into that stitch right there. Get your crochet hook back. And you're just going to single crochet all the way around in the in the 4th round. And again, I'm wrong again. This is actually the 5th round. I'm a very tight crocheter. I crochet very tight, so I apologize if my crochet hook at any point becomes squeaky. It tends to do that as it warms up when I'm crocheting. Alright, so there you are. It tends to curl a little bit after you've done a single crochet round. If you just flatten it down, it pulls itself right back. Because it is tending to, it doesn't, it's at a very, very slow taper when you're doing it this way. It could also be staying flat, but it could also be at a slight taper if that's what you're going for, which is, and a toque is what we're going for at this point. Alright, so you are done row 5 now. Okay, so now we're doing round 6. So again, this is every other row, so this is the every other row that we increase. So we're going to be doing the pattern of a single crochet, and then 2 single crochets in the 3rd stitch, and that pattern is going to remain all the way around. So we're going to start on the first one here, remove our stitch marker, Make sure I got all the yarn on my hook. There we are. And then we go into that stitch where your marker was and you do one single crochet. Then you can put your stitch marker back in. Alright, so then we're going to do a second single crochet in the next stitch. Sorry, one single crochet in the first stitch, one single crochet in the second stitch. It's always the third stitch in this round where we're going to put 2 single crochets. So we've got one, and we're going to go in for the second one. Alright, so we're going to do the same pattern again. We're going to do single crochet, and then the third stitch, there's 2 single crochets in the same stitch. Alright, so we're going to do that same pattern all the way around, and I'll meet you up on the last stitch. Okay, so we're on the last stitch of this round, and like I said, if it's on an increase round, the last stitch is always where you're going to put your 2 stitches in. If it's not that way, you might want to go back and check what you did wrong, because something is wrong in this round if you didn't land on a double. Alright, so my last stitch, I've got the 2 single crochets done, and then the last stitch I'm going to put 2 more in the same stitch. There you are. So now you're down, I believe this is round 6, and you can always tell, I count the first one, it's kind of got their rings, kind of like a tree. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Alright, so row 6 is done, and that was an increase round, so that means this next round is not an increase round. You're going to be doing single crochets throughout the whole round around. So you can continue doing that around this round, which is the 7th round, and I will meet you up on the last stitch again. Okay, so you've done single crochets all the way around this round, which is round 7. And it does tend to want to curl a little bit, like I said though, just flatten it out. It will flatten itself pretty good actually, but naturally it just always wants to curl, and it always actually wants to curl the wrong way. So you gotta constantly keep on putting it down, and then once you get to a certain point in the toque, it will just naturally go the way it's supposed to go. Alright, so now we're on that last single crochet of round 7. There you are, so round 7 is now complete. So this was not an increase round, so it means the next one is. So we take out our stitch marker for now, we put in a single crochet, and we put the stitch marker back in just above the top 2 loops. Alright, so I'm not sure if you've caught on to the pattern yet. That is the way increasing is done for my toques, at least, is on each increasing round, your single crochets before a 2 double crochet in one stitch increases by 1 each time you increase. So last time we increased on round 6 was 2 single crochets in the 3rd stitch. Now there's going to be 2 single crochets in the 4th stitch. Alright, so we're going to go, we already did 1, and here's 2, 3, and the 4th one is where you're going to put the double crochet. And if you ever wonder, like, you're not going to have a written pattern necessarily the way I've written mine out, just in little gibberish as I'm going along, but you can kind of tell. I'm not sure if you can see there though, but there is a double in that one right there. There's 2 V's in one, and then the one above it is a single because you just did a single in each stitch around. And then this one, that's where you know you have to put the double. There's several different ways. You can go that way by visual look, or you can just increase the amount of single crochets between when you do 2 single crochets in one stitch, if that makes any sense at all. But there is several different ways going about it. But the way I always remember is that you always increase the amount of single crochets you do by 1 before you do a double, sorry, not a double, but 2 single crochets in the same stitch. It seems to be like I'm talking in circles sometimes, but hopefully some of you understand that. Alright, so now we're still going with every 4th stitch is 2 single crochets in the same stitch. So we're going 1, 2, 3, and 4th one is where you put 2 double crochets, or sorry, 2 single crochets in that one. Alright, so you're going to do that same pattern with 3 single crochets and then 2 single crochets in the same stitch of that pattern all the way around until you reach the last stitch here before your marker, and I will meet you then. Okay, we are on the last stitch of an increasing round, which is round 8. And the last stitch, like I said, is always going to be your double stitch, 2 of the single crochets in the same stitch when you're doing an increase round. Alright, so then that means this next round is going to be a non-increasing round, so you're just going to go around and single crochet in every stitch there is. I will meet you on the last stitch again. Okay, so we're in the last stitch of a row 9, and yeah, just keep flattening it out. It will do what it's supposed to do by the end, believe me. So we're going to put that last single crochet in this stitch because it is non-increasing round. Take out the marker. Oh, and it looks like I got it caught on something. Oh no, it didn't. Alright, so then this is row 10. So it's going to be an increase round again. So last time there was 3 single crochets and then 2 single crochets in the same stitch. This time there will be 4 single crochets, and then in the 5th stitch you'll put 2 single crochets in. Alright, so let's go ahead with that. I'm going to do our first one, and then of course put the marker back in, and then 2, 3, 4. But in the 5th one is where we're going to put the 2 single crochets in the same stitch, right? So do that again. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the 5th one we're going to put 2 single crochets in this stitch. Alright, so you continue that pattern until the last stitch in this round, and I'll meet you up there. Okay, we're just finishing up round 10 here, which is an increase round. So the last stitch, we are going to put in 2 single crochets. And so that means round 11 is going to be single crochets in each stitch all the way around. So you can do that, and then we'll meet you up at the end of this row again. Okay, working on the last stitch here now of row 11, and then we're going to go into row 12. And the pattern continues for increasing as it has in each increased row so far. We're going to put the first one in and mark our stitcher again, or a stitch marker. And we're going to make sure that we do 5 single crochets and then 2 single crochets in the 6th stitch. Alright, so we've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then in the 6th stitch we're going to do a single crochet and a single crochet, so 2 single crochets in the 6th stitch. Right, we'll do it again. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and in the 6th one we're going to put 2 single crochets in the same stitch. Alright, so then you can continue that pattern all the way around, doing single crochets in 5 stitches, and then in 6 stitches, in the 6th stitch, put in 2 single crochets in the same stitch. And we will meet up with you on the last stitch of this round. Okay, so we are just finishing up round 12, and in the last stitch, since it's an increasing round, will always be 2 single crochets in that same stitch. Alright, since this was an increasing round, the next round, I'm sure you're following along already, will be just a single crochet in each stitch all the way around. Alright, we'll meet up with you on the last stitch of round 13. Alright, so we're finishing up row 13, and so we will put a single crochet in the last stitch. Since this was not an increasing round, that means this next round will be. So for round 14, we'll be increasing the pattern again. So we'll be putting a single crochet in the first 6 stitches, and then in the 7th stitch we'll put 2 single crochets. Alright, so we'll go ahead with the first one. And then of course always put your marker back in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, oh, got a straggler, 6, and then in the 7th stitch is where we put 2 single crochets in the same stitch. Alright, one more time. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then in the 7th stitch, 2 single crochets in the same stitch. Alright, so you can just continue that pattern until you get to the last stitch, and that's where I'll meet up with you. Okay, so we are finishing up round 14, and that means it's an increase round, so there will be 2 single crochets in that last stitch. Okay, so this is where the toque kind of starts looking a little wonky. It will shape up, I promise, but it just is not quite sure what you're wanting to do with it. So you can always tend to pull it out, and you can kind of see the toque kind of dome starting to appear. Alright, so since this was an increase round for row 14, then that means for this next round, which will be round 15, it will be just single crochets all the way around. Alright, I will do that, and I will meet up with you on the last stitch of row 15. Okay, so this is row 15 that we're just doing the last stitch on now. Oh, there we are. Okay, so row 16. In this pattern, or at least this particular size, this will be our last increase round. Alright, so like I said, this is our last increase round, so it's going to continue the pattern. We're going to have 7 single crochets, and then in the 8th single crochet stitch, or sorry, in the 8th stitch, we're going to have 2 single crochets. So we're going to start with our first one, put the marker back in, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So now this 8th stitch is where we will put 2 single crochets in the same stitch. Alright, we'll do it again. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then the 8th stitch is where you want to put 2 single crochets in there. Alright, so you continue that pattern all the way around until I will meet you in the last stitch of this round. Okay, so we are just finishing up the last stitch on row 16, and this is our last increase round. So what we're going to do, I've already got the 1 single crochet in the last stitch. We're going to put 1 more single crochet in there because it is an increase round, and there you are. Okay, so like I said, this is the last of the increase rounds. You're just going to keep on doing single crochets all the way around. Make sure you keep your stitch marker in your first stitch of each round. And you will be doing single crochets in each round, just 1 single crochet in each stitch from this next round, which is round 17, all the way through to round 27. So when you're on the last stitch of row 27, that is where I will meet up with you. Alright? Okay, so now that you've finished, or almost finished, you've got 1 stitch left in this round, but row 27, you realize it very quickly started looking like a toque. As soon as you stop increasing, the walls, as it looks like, I guess, the walls of the toque kind of start forming, and it becomes an actual hat shape. Alright, so at row 27, you can see this is obviously not a complete toque, but because this is a toque with a style where it's just the opening where the face is, it will go down over the ears and it'll go down right down to the shoulders, and then it'll meet up again by the chin. So it'll have the purpose of a scarf and a hat at the same time. So this top part of the toque is actually more narrow because of its the different style type that the toque is. Alright, so this is where the forehead will be. It'll come up to this point. Then there'll also be a trimming ledge as well. So then there'll be that one extra row. But for now, we're just going to go around here and then come around here, and we're going to start creating the face opening. Alright, so actually I guess it would be here instead. The face opening will be right over here, and we will turn and we will start crocheting this way, and then we'll go back and forth until we get to the point where we need to start increasing and adding stitches so that it goes along the jawline, and then eventually getting to the point where we actually meet up and start going all the way around again like we did up until this point. So at this point we are on row 27 still. We need to add one last crochet to this last stitch here to finish row 27. Alright, so rather than continuing on in this stitch, like removing the stitch marker and continuing, we're going to turn around and go this way, the way we came from. Alright, so in order to do that, we're going to chain one, and then we're going to turn our work. So if this, for the first time, we're actually going to be working from the other side. And then we're going to want to single crochet in the next 68 stitches. Alright, so we start off going to this very first one. You want to make sure you catch the first crochet. Don't go to the second one here. Go to the first one. Otherwise, if you go to the second one, you'll eventually have a line that goes off to the side rather than going straight. Alright, so you go into that first single crochet. It can sometimes be a little bit awkward that first round, but there you are. And then you want to single crochet in the next 68 stitches. Alright, so once you've crocheted 68 stitches, stop, and I will meet you at that point. Alright, so we have now finished row 28, and we have gone around the other way. This is the first time we've gone around the other way for 68 stitches, and it brought us to this point. So when you look at it now, this is where you started this row and this is where you ended this row. This is where the face will be right here. This will be the opening. So now for the next 3 rows, that'll be rows 29, 30, and 31. They will be exactly the same as you just did now, but of course you'll be going back and forth, right? Okay, so same as last time, you chain one and then you turn your work around. So now we're working again in the same way that we had done for the entire toque and up until this last row. Alright, so we want to single crochet for the next 68 stitches because it's the same amount of stitches for the next 3 rows. Want to make sure we start single crocheting in this first one here. Don't go to the second one, but make sure you go to the first one right here. Alright. It's 1, 2, 3. So again, it'll be 68 stitches. The last stitch in this row, it's a little bit difficult to find exactly where that stitch is, unless if you've done this before and know where to look for it. So what I'll do is I'll meet up with you again at the last stitch of this row and help you find out exactly where it is and how to find it. Okay, so now we've finished this on row 29. The 67 of the 68 stitches needed. Like I mentioned, I was going to show you how to get into this last stitch. This is the 67 stitch. Obviously there's another one that you're supposed to do, right? But where is it? You just have to, there's the little one that goes over here, that one right there. Go right to the right of it, and then look up, and you're going to see those 2 pieces of yarn right there. Those are the ones you want to go into. That's actually your V. So as long as you push just to the right of that one piece of yarn that's going up and down, and then you'll see the V on the top, and you push through, you'll start to see your hook coming through. then it'll be the single crochet from there. Alright, and then you'll see that that's a nice straight line up. Okay, so for the next 2 rows, you're going to continue to do exactly what you did for this row and the row before it. You chain 1, you turn your work, and then you single crochet in the next 68 stitches, and that will be rows 30 and 31. I will meet up with you again at the end of row 31. Alright, so this is what it is looking like after you have finished row 31. You've gone 4 rows past the forehead point here. So what we're going to need to do is now we're going to need to change it up a little bit in regards to just doing a single crochet all the way around. And the reason why is you need to decrease a little bit on the rounds, because what this will do is this will compensate for the head getting a little bit smaller as it goes down towards the back of the head. Your head kind of dips down in the back there and it gets narrower. So I would like to have it more of a little bit of a, it's not fitted, but it's also not super loose then, right? So what I've done is this next round, which is round 32, will be a decrease round actually. So what we'll do is we will chain 1 and turn our work. And what we can do is we can take this out. We don't necessarily need to mark it anymore. We will place them back in a later point. Okay, so we've chained 1, we've turned our work. We will single crochet in the next 17 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Okay, so then after we've single crocheted 17 stitches, we are going to decrease in 1 stitch. And if you're not familiar with how to decrease in a single crochet, I will show you right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn 2 stitches from the previous row into 1. So we're going to go into the stitch, just like we would for single crochet, yarn over and pull through. But rather than yarning over and pulling through again, we are going to go through the next stitch, yarn over and pull through, so that you have 3 loops on your hook, and then you'll yarn over and pull through all 3. So now there's just 1 stitch, but we've used up 2 of the ones below it. Alright, so then we will need to crochet into the next 14 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. Okay, so then at that point, we are going to need to decrease a stitch again. So we'll do the exact same thing. You go into the next stitch, yarn over and pull through, and then you go into the next stitch again, yarn over, pull through, and then you're going to yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on your hook. Alright, so then we are going to single crochet in the next 14 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. Alright, And then we're going to decrease again. So the same as before, into the next stitch, yarn over, pull through, and then into the next stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, and pull through all 3 loops on the hook. And then we will finish off this row by single crocheting in the last 17 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and again that's the funny one, just to the right of that up and down piece of yarn, press below. You need to get through those top 2 pieces. There you are. And single crochet. So you've completed your first decrease round, right? So now it's coming to the part of the head where it goes down and then meets the neck, right? So it narrows down a bit. All right. So next thing we'll do is we want to start rounds 33 and 34. Okay, so what rounds 33 and 34 are is chaining 1. Let me just get my hook back in here. You chain 1, and of course you turn your work. I have a really long tail in here, but I like to keep a long tail. It gives me a lot of room to sew it in later on. I don't really don't like having a short little tail and then trying to get it into your yarn needle and trying to sew it back in. So I always tend to keep the longer one. You don't have to keep it as long as I do, but I tend to keep them fairly long. Alright, so rounds 33 and 34, they're going to be the exact same thing. And we've already chained 1, we've turned our work, and we're going to single crochet all the way through. Make sure you're always starting from that first one. That's 1, 2, and because we decreased 3 times, that means we should have 65 stitches left on this, sorry, not left, but 65 stitches total on this row. So you will do that for rows 33 and 34, and I will meet you at the end of row 34. Okay, so we are on row 35, which is again another decrease round. So this is the way it'll go. Hook back in the loop, and like usual you chain 1 and you turn your work, and we're going to single crochet in the first 16 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. So then in the next stitch, for the next stitch, we'll have to do a decrease stitch. So we'll go into the stitch, yarn over, pull through, go into the next stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, and pull through all 3 loops on the hook. Alright, so then we will single crochet in the next 13 stitches now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. So now we'll have another decrease stitch. Yarn over, pull through, yarn over in the next stitch, pull through all 3 loops. Alright, so now we will crochet in the next 13 stitches again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. Alright, so one last decrease stitch for this round. Go in, yarn over, go into the next stitch, yarn over, and pull through all 3 loops on the hook. Alright, so to end this row we are going to single crochet in the last 17 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So you can see I kind of pulled the hook here a little bit, but that'll all, the hook pulled the yarn a bit here. That'll all cover up. Sometimes you can even just stretch it and it'll go away, but if it doesn't, it'll cover it up as you crochet over it. 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and again the last one is 17 in that last little hiding stitch. And there you are. So you are done with round 35. For rounds 36 and 37, it'll just be single crochets all the way around. So they will, actually no, 36 and 37 will be slightly different for each one. So what we'll do is we can do a single crochet, or sorry, a chain, and then turn your work. Alright, so then starting row 36, it'll be single crochet all the way through to the end. And then on the end stitch, we will be putting 2 single crochets in that last stitch, because this is when it starts angling along the jawline to meet up by the chin area, right? We're going to have a little bit longer pieces starting coming here, and also on this end as well, so that it can start to meet towards the chin. All right. And your single crochet in each stitch, just 1 single crochet in each stitch until you get to the last stitch. Alright, so I will meet up with you on this very last stitch here. Okay, so we are in the last stitch now of row 36, and we're going to need to put 2 in this last stitch here. So you put the first one in like usual, but since we want it to start angling in more towards the chin, we're going to put another one in this single crochet as well. Alright, you can already see it's starting to just curl a little bit out. Alright, so for row 37 we're going to do the exact same thing that we did for row 36. We're going to do that chain 1 that I just did here, turn your work, and you're going to single crochet in each stitch all the way around. And then when you get to the last one, make sure you do 2 in that last stitch as well. And also make sure that you're getting into this very first stitch here. You want to go right there, don't go out over here, make sure you go right in there, because then you'll be getting that extra stitch. Alright, we'll meet you on the last stitch of row 37. Okay, so we are on the last stitch of row 37. We've done 1 single crochet in that last stitch, but now we're going to have to put a second one, because like I said, we were increasing on the last stitch of these rounds now, because we're starting to angle towards the chin on both sides. Alright, so we've done that 2 single crochet in that last stitch, so we're going to start row 38. So we're going to chain 1 and turn our work. Alright, so this is both an increase and a decrease round. So what we'll be doing is decreasing, of course, throughout here, and then increasing on the end stitch again. Alright, so we will single crochet in the next 16 stitches. Make sure you get that first one there from that second double or second single crochet that you did in the last stitch of the previous row. Right? It's that one right there. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. Alright, so then we're going to decrease in this next stitch. We're going to go into the next stitch, yarn over, pull through, go into the stitch after that, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, and pull through all 3 loops on the hook. Alright, so we're going to single crochet into the next 13 stitches now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. Alright, so then now it's time for another decrease stitch. So go into the next stitch, yarn over, pull through, go into the stitch after that, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, and pull through all 3 loops on the hook, like that. Alright, so we're going to single crochet into the next 13 stitches now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. And this is our last decrease stitch for the round. So go into the next stitch, yarn over, pull through, go into the stitch after that, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, and pull through all 3 loops on the hook. Alright, so now we are going to single crochet into the last 16 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and then 16 is the last one here. And again, because we are increasing on these last ones, we're going to put one more, and that's going to be our increase stitch for the round. So there's 2 single crochets in the last stitch there. Alright, so that is the end of round 38. Alright, so here we have finished round 38 by putting the last by putting 2 single crochets in the last stitch. Alright, so then the next rounds 39 through 42, which are the next 4 rounds, are all identical to each other. So there's no more decreasing, we're just single crocheting all the way around, except for in the last stitch, we're still putting 2 single crochets in the last stitch of each of the next 4 rows. So what will happen is you will have 63, 64, 65, and 66 stitches in the corresponding next 4 rounds. Alright, so then this first round, which is round 39, you would chain 1, turn your work, and then single crochet in all the stitches till you reach the end, and have 2 single crochets in that last stitch right over here. And then that first round you will have 63 stitches, and you will do the same things for the next 3 rounds after that. So then you'll gain 1 stitch each round, so you'll end up with 66 stitches at the end of round 42. All right, and that's where I'll meet up with you. I'll meet up with you on the last stitch of row 42. All right. Okay, so I'm on the last stitch now of row 42. I've put my first single crochet in that last stitch. I'm going to put one more in there. There, so then row 42 is done. Round 43 is going to be where you connect the two sides back together. It never wants to sit right at this point because there's a lot of yarn and it doesn't quite know what you're wanting to do with it. So it doesn't sit quite right, but it will. All right. So for round 43, we're going to single crochet, or not single crochet, chain one, turn our work, and we're going to single crochet all the way to the last stitch. All right, and that's the point where I will meet you again. Okay, so we are on the last stitch now of row 43. We are going to put one single crochet in that last stitch. All right, and we won't need to worry about putting a second one in here because this is the point where we are going to join the two together. All right, and by doing that, we are going to chain 15. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. All right, so once you've got 15 on your chain there, we are going to single crochet to this very first stitch. All right, you can find it right on the end there. It's that last V right over here. Alright. Oh, my yarn is on the wrong side. Always make sure your yarn is on the back. Right, so that stitch right there. And single crochet. So then what I do at this point is this is where I put my stitch marker back in, right in those top two loops of the last single crochet that you just did. Alright, because now this is going to be the first stitch of every round at this point. Alright, so then that is the end of row 43. For row 44, you'll need to single crochet in all the stitches around, and it'll also include your 15 chains here. So you will have a total of 81 stitches at that point. Alright, so then I will meet you back at the 81st stitch once you've gone around this whole round. Okay, so we're on this last single crochet now. It's the number 81 in this round, and it's in the chain. It can be a little bit difficult to single crochet into the chain, but what I do is I just take that bottom loop and I go right in there. And that is single crochet number 81 in this round. So as you can see at this point, it has joined. So then now you can see how the face opening is there now. All right, my single crochet can hang the right way. So there you are. So then it is ready for the opening of the face. All right, let's kind of start seeing the shape of it. All right, so I'll put my hook back in the loop. And for the next 5 rounds, you are doing single crochets in all 81 stitches. No increases, no decreases. It's just 81 stitches in all the way around in each stitch. And you'll be doing that for the next 5 rows. So then by the end of the 5 rows, you'll be on row 49, and I will meet up with you on the last stitch of row 49. Okay, so we have finished now. This is what the toque looks like after rows 49 is completed. I'll turn it around here. So we did the last stitch on row 49 here. So now you've got a little bit, it should be a total of 6 rows here past the chin point. Alright, so it's starting to quite a bit look like it's what it's supposed to. So that's a good thing at this point, because you always want it to look like what you were planning for it to look like. Alright, so we are going to go ahead with row 50 now. This row, or round, whichever you're calling it, I tend to call it both, is an increase round, because what we want to do is we wanted to keep it snug. That's why we decreased a little bit going in here. Not in the last 5 rows, obviously, but that's why we kind of decreased as we were going down here. We wanted it to get narrower, not only in the back of the head, but also towards the side of the face, so that there's not big gaping openings along here, so that the wind could get right in and get to their ears anyway, right? So now we are going to increase it so that it's easier for them to get over their head. I realize it's upside down, but I'm assuming you can follow what I'm meaning here. Alright, so then for row 50, we are going to single crochet in the first 15 stitches. So again, we can remove our stitch marker, put the first single crochet in, and then put the stitch marker back in. Alright, so that was the first. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. So now we are going to be increasing in this next stitch. So we want to put 2 single crochets in the same stitch. So we're going to go 1 and then go back into the same stitch and do a second single crochet. Alright, so then now we're going to single crochet in the next 19 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19. And now in the next stitch we're going to put another increase stitch, which is 2 single crochets into the same stitch. So we have the first one and then go back into the same stitch and do a second single crochet. Alright, we are going to crochet in the next, or single crochet in the next 19 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19. Alright, so then we're going to have another increase stitch here, so 2 single crochets into the same stitch. So the first one, go back into the same stitch and do a second one. Alright, so now we are going to single crochet in the last 25 stitches, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, and 25 into that last stitch. Alright, so then you've completed round 50. Alright, so for round 51, you will just need to single crochet in all the stitches all the way around. It should be 84 stitches at this point if you want to make sure that your stitches are correct, and I will meet you up at the end of the next row, which is 51. Okay, so we finished row 51 now, which was single crochets all the way around. Now 52 is going to be another increase round. So we'll move the stitch marker, crochet in the first stitch, and then of course put the stitch marker back in. Alright, so then we need to crochet in the first 16 stitches, a single crochet. So we've already done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and then we're going to have an increase stitch, which is 2 single crochets in the same stitch. So we will do 1 single crochet and then go back in the same stitch for a second one. Alright, so now we're going to single crochet in the next 20 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. Okay, so this next stitch is going to be another increase stitch. So we'll put 2 single crochets in the same stitch. So 1 single crochet and then back into the same stitch for a second one. Alright, now we're going to single crochet in the next 20 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. And what you hear in the background is my dog drinking her water, so just in case if you're wondering what that noise was. Alright, so I'm going to double count that just to make sure I did that one right. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. Correct. For some reason I thought I had missed one there. Okay, so then the next stitch is going to be a increase stitch again, so 2 single crochets into the same stitch. Alright, so then the last bit here is to single crochet in the last 25 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, and 25. Okay, so we have just completed row 52. So then the next rounds from 53 to 61 are all going to be just single crocheting in one in each stitch. So this is 87 stitches that we're up to right now. So you can crochet in each stitch all the way around until the end of row 61, and that's when I will meet up with you then. Okay, so we have finished round 61, and this is what the toque looks like at this point. It's a little bit almost too long to keep it all in frame, but that is what it looks like right now. This spot here is just a little bit, it's like they got a little bit of a yarn fault there, as a little bit of brown got mixed in with the yarn, but I figured that would be okay in this case because there's actually going to be brown as the trim and some other accent pieces, so it'll fit in just fine for me. Alright, so like I said, we're finished row 61. We've now finished the actual toque and scarf part. Now there's going to be a triangular piece going down over the chest. What I've designed this for is that so many kids do not zip up their toque or zip up their jackets properly, right? And the moms and dads are always saying, zip up your jacket, right? And at least if they don't do that, then at least part of their chest is still covered from the wind, right? That, and it also kind of looks like the Ewok style in Star Wars. Of course, you can't miss that part. Alright, okay, so we're going to start on row, it's actually going to continue row 61 here. And at this point, I'm not necessarily even counting rows because we have technically finished this part of the toque, and now it's just doing the last angled piece, which we're all going to be similar and slowly decreasing. So I have found that I need to single crochet another 17 stitches until I get to the end side here. I want the one just before the absolute edge. I want the one just before that, and for me that is 17 stitches. Alright, so then you can remove this stitch marker, and you can actually remove it. For me, I remove it and I don't need it anymore for the rest of this toque. Okay, so like I said, we need to single crochet in the next 17 stitches. So we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17. Okay. So, and the way that I found that out is that I just laid it flat, made sure that the face opening was in the center, facing up, and this is the last one that kind of faces up, the last stitch, right? So that is how I decided that that would be the last stitch there. Okay, so now we are going to go in and start doing the chest piece. So we're going to need to actually go back this way, and we're going to be going back and forth again, just like we did when we were doing the face opening part. Alright, so we will need to chain 1 and turn our work. It gets a little bulky at this point, especially the bigger the toque, the more bulky it gets, but you just have to work around it. Okay, so what we're going to do in the very first stitch is we are going to do a decrease stitch. So we're going to go in this very first one here, make sure you don't miss this one, yarn over and pull through, and then go on to the next one, yarn over and pull through, yarn over and pull through all 3. Alright, so then we will do a single crochet for the next 39 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, and 39. So if we pull the loop loose, flip it over again, and you'll see actually we'll keep the same style as we had before just to keep it the same. So we had this one, was right over here. So you can see these are the last stitches that would be face up and not curling over the side. Alright, so we'll go back to where we were working here. So then we want to go around to the next round. So we'll do the same thing again. We will chain 1 and we will turn our work. And then we want to go into that first one, but the first stitch of every single row is always going to be a decrease. And that's basically what you do until the end. I do it until there is only 5 stitches left, including the decrease. You use that as 1 stitch. So there would be a decrease and then 4 single crochets. That's when I stop the toque. If you want to have a really super pointy point at the end, then you would keep on doing it until you can't do it anymore. But I do it until there's 5. Alright, so I'll walk you through this one. So remember the first one here, and we're going to do a decrease at the first stitch of every single row now. So we've gone through, yarn through, and pulled through for the first stitch, and then you yarn through the next stitch, yarn over, pull through, and you yarn over and pull through all 3 hooks. So you're always doing a decrease on that first round, and that's what makes it slowly go up in a triangle. Alright, and then you single crochet all the way to the end, and at this point I'm not too concerned about keeping numbers in regards to the number of stitches. I don't worry about keeping track of that at this point, because all you're going to have to do is you're going to have to crochet to the end of the row, and then when you chain and turn your work, your first stitch is always a decrease stitch. So it's not really too concerning, at least for me, for counting your stitches at this point. But if that is something that you're comfortable with or that you wish to do, by all means go ahead. Just know that you'll be decreasing your stitches every round then. Okay, so we are single crocheting right to the end. To where we turned around on our last row. Alright, so this is going to be your last stitch. Again, you can always tell because there's that one stitch that goes up and down, right, this one right here, and then right next to it is the piece that goes sideways like that. You just want to go right in there. And this one is actually going to be easier for you to do than previous last end stitches because it is a decrease stitch there, and it's two pulled together, so it kind of has a bigger space in between there than the usual regular stitch. Alright, so then what we do, we chain one, turn your work, and again your first stitch is a decrease stitch, so you go into this one right here, excuse me, go into this one right here, yarn over and pull through, go into your next stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over and pull through all 3 loops on your hook. Okay, so then that next row you've done your 2 stitches together to do a decrease. So you're going to single crochet all the way to the end again, just like you did for your last turn. And you're going to keep on doing that, going back and forth and back and forth. And what you'll notice is that it will go down slowly on either end. And it'll decrease and taper down. And like I mentioned earlier, you can go as narrow as you want. I go until there is the 1 decrease stitch and 4 single crochets. That's the point that I prefer it, but you can choose exactly how pointy you want that edge to be on the bottom. Okay, so then you can keep on doing that, doing your single crochets all along each round, each row, going back and forth, and always making sure you do a decrease stitch in the first stitch. And I will meet you closer towards the end of the tapered edge. What you will notice is one side will want to curl under and one side will want to curl up. We're going to fix that a little bit in when we're doing the edging. So don't be too concerned about that. It's just the natural of what the yarn wants to do when you're doing the decrease stitches on the ends. And then it gets slowly narrower. It's just what the yarn does naturally. Alright, so we will meet you when we get closer towards the end of the tapered edge. Okay, so I am now most of the way down the angled chest covering piece, and just wanted to show you what it was looking like for me here. Like I said, it does want to kind of curl up on this end and curl under on this end. It's just because you're doing the decrease stitches on the ends there, and that's just what the yarn will naturally want to do. It will straighten out more when you're doing your trim afterwards. But I am down to 7 stitches, so it's the 1 decrease stitch plus 6 single crochets. So I am going to continue the last 2 rows with you. And I've done the chain already, so I can flip my work. And I do 1 decrease stitch. And I've got 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. I do the chain, flip my work, and I do a decrease stitch in the first 2 stitches there to make them 1. So that is 1 stitch, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So that is kind of the edge that I personally like to have, is to kind of have a little bit of a straight edge, but not very much. Comes down enough so that it can cover that little bit, that they don't zip up their jackets all the way. And also just to protect their chest a little bit extra, just you want to keep them warm. So that is where I'm going to end this part of the tutorial. There will be more in regards to trimming. I will have the flap that comes over here. It'll be attaching, and I'll have a flap that comes over with those 3 X's on them. We'll do the trim around here. We'll do the trim all along the bottom and around the back there as well. And we'll also put the ears on. So it is quite an involved toque in regards to time spent doing it. Of course, it depends entirely on how fast you crochet. But if this is new to you, it may take you a little while, but I can guarantee you it will be worth it when it's done, because it turns out to be pretty cute, in my opinion. It looks pretty cute on my nephews, that's for sure. So this is where I'm going to end this round right here in regards to 5 stitches on the bottom. So I'm going to cut my end. I always give a fairly big tail. I'd rather have too much than too little. I can't stand trying to sew in a tiny little piece of yarn. Okay, so then you put it back on the hook, tighten it up, do a loop through just like you're going to do a chain, but pull all the way through this time. And tighten it down. And then we will sew that end in later on. But there you are. Congratulations on getting this far. Alright, so the next clip will be adding the forehead piece here. Okay, so the next step that we're going to be doing is going to be putting this forehead flap on, the one that comes over right there. So since there is nothing here for us to attach to, we're going to actually have to attach one onto our hook now. When I say one, I mean string or yarn, of course. Alright, the way I do this is I pull it over my pointy finger, and then I pull it over again. And then I just hold it back there, however which way. You pull the top one over the bottom one, and then you pull the top one over the bottom one again. But this time you pull it right over the edge of your finger, and you put your crochet hook in, and you're holding onto the string that goes to the yarn ball, and you just tighten. You can pull both of them and it becomes nice and tight, and you've got a tail. You want to have enough of a tail that if you're not going to be crocheting it right away, that you have enough room to put your yarn needle on it and actually sew it in. You don't want to do it really, really short. But for me, I usually do about this long because I crochet it in right away so I don't have to sew it in. Call me lazy, but that's the way I like to do it. Okay, so you're going to be putting the toque so that the chest piece, arrow angled piece, is pointing away from you. The top of the toque is facing you. Alright, so then you want to go into not this stitch, because this is the one that already is the side of your toque. You want to go into the stitch right next to it, and with your hook, with your loop on the hook already, you push it in, and you kind of hold it there with your finger, and you yarn over, you pull through, yarn over, and pull through. So you've got your first single crochet right there. But then what I do is I pull that tail piece, and I pull it so that I'm going to be crocheting over it at this point. So I won't have to sew it in. Alright, so we're going to single crochet in the next 21 stitches, which will bring us up to this last stitch. It's the last stitch that has not been used before this side of the toque starts. Alright, so there's the first stitch done. 2, and you just hold this tail piece in here so that you're crocheting right over it. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. This end is getting a little bit harder to hold on to. 17, right? Yeah. And then what I'm going to do is, rather than trying to hold on to that piece, I just make sure I hold my yarn out of the way, and I take my scissors and I just cut it right there, right next to it, so then it disappears. There's just this tiny little piece that I've taken out. Alright, so you don't need to worry about holding that one in. It's all sewed in. You don't have to, or it's all crocheted in. You don't even have to sew it in. Right, so then we just finish. 18, 19, 20, 21, and 22. Okay, so then what we're going to do after that is we're going to have to turn and go the other way. Okay, so when we turn, we always have to do one chain, and then you turn and go the other way. It does get a little bit awkward because, like I had said earlier, it's just a lot of toque to be kind of moving around. And this one we're going to do the same. We're going to do 22 stitches back and forth until we've done 10 rows. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. And this is where you joined in. So make sure that you count your stitches so you're doing all 22, because this one right here can be hard to miss because it does look a little bit different because of the way it had to be attached in. So you go in there. There you are. So that is 22. Alright, so we chain and we go back again. So you can kind of see that it's getting a little bit of a lip here, right? So this is where it'll start to fold over. But for now, we just crochet, right? Make sure you don't miss that first stitch there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, and 22. Okay, so then we'll continue doing that, the same thing. Make sure you chain before you turn your work, and go 22 stitches and do that for 10 rows. And I'll meet up with you at the end of the 10th row. Okay, so I have finished the 10th row now on the forehead flap. What I did do is I cut the yarn, and I just did a chain and flipped it right through to tie it off. I don't keep it very long. I know I've talked about short tails for a couple times, I believe, in this tutorial, but this one, I don't mind if it's short because I'm actually not going to be sewing it in. When I sew this flap piece on to the actual hat, I'm going to be putting this behind there, so there's no reason to sew it in. It's going to be stuck behind there anyway. Alright, so right now we're going to be working on putting the design on here, which is the X's. So again, we will need our yarn needle, and I cut about 3 feet of the taupe heather yarn. Okay, and what I do to attach it into my yarn needle, put the yarn through, is I kind of just twist it the way the yarn is already twisting. I twist it and then hold it between my pointing finger and my thumb, and then I take the eyelet and I kind of just wiggle it in there and pull it through. Okay, so we know we have 3 X's to put on here, and there's 22 stitches. So taking off the stitch from the side and the other side, we have now 20 stitches, right? Because it was 22 long, we're going to take 2 stitches, one from each end off, which leaves us with 20. When we will need 5 spaces, there'll be one X and then a space, 1 X and a space and another X. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 even spaces that we're trying to put in. So that is every 4, each one has 4 stitches. The X will have 4 stitches and the space will have 4 stitches. Alright, so we're going to go in from the back first. I like to keep it 1 from the top and of course 1 from the side. Makes it very even. So we go in through that stitch first. I pull it until there's, you know, a little bit of a tail left over so that I can tie that in later on. Alright, so then we're going to want to go 1 from the bottom, and then you say, okay, how do I know for sure which stitch is the bottom? I'm not sure if you can tell, but these are 2 rows here. Each of them, they'll have a nice defined line between them. That's every 2 rows. So we've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So we know that this is your bottom right over here. Right? This is that line. Here's another line. So we're going to want to go in. This would be the row right here. Of course you can design exactly how big you want the design, or even no design or a different design. It's entirely up to you. This is what I've done because this is kind of what it looked like in the picture of the Ewok hat from the Star Wars movies. Okay, but I don't want to go here because that's not going to make an X, right? Remember I said each one has 4 stitches width. So we got 1, 2, 3, and 4. Alright, that's where it's going to come in. So we're going to go the X across this way. So of course we want to go in through the front. That would not have been good going in through the back. Okay, so that'll be our first half of the first X. But I find that doesn't always show up that well. I like to put a double. So then I go back up to the top one again, same one that you first went into. There you are. Don't pull it too tight, otherwise it's going to want to curl. Just make sure you've got it still straight. Excuse me. I also am holding on to the tail in the back. For the first few stitches I kind of hold on to it just because when you're pulling you can't always remember exactly how long it is. I always find it gets short way faster than what I thought it was going to. So I kind of hold on to it so I don't yank it through. Alright, so then to double up this stitch we're just going to go back into that stitch. There we are. The stitches are nice and side by side. So then we're going to want to do this side, right? We're going to go, so this is 1, 2, 3, sorry, this is the first stitch, so we've got 1, 2, 3, and 4. And you know that's right because you're 1 stitch away from the end, right? And it matches up with the top. Okay. And here you're going to want to do the same thing here. You know this is the stitch you're in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Alright. And I do the same thing again, come in through the bottom stitch on the right and go back into this one here on the top left. And there you are. So that pops a lot more than if it's just a single piece of yarn. Right. So this is where the second X would start. And it would go 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the stitch, how wide it would be. Yeah, then I can just count it over and it's 1, 2, 3, 4. That's, like I said, where the second X would end. You go 1, 2, 3, 4. That's where the top right corner of the last X would be. 1, 2, 3, 4, which brings you right into that last stitch, right? I just kind of like to count because I get a little paranoid about it, even though I know, like, math doesn't lie, right? But sometimes I get paranoid about my counting. Alright, so we're going to make sure we follow the same stitch that's on the bottom here. And we go right down to that one. We can always count it as well. 1, 2, sorry, we count the first one here. 1, 2, 3, 4. But we don't want to go straight down because then we're going to have a straight line. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, and 4. You know, always when I do the first line, it always seems to be like it's much wider than what it should be. Again, maybe my counting paranoia coming through there. Oh, and then the piece in the back kind of got tangled. Not a big deal if it does, but... Okay, then we go over to the stitch below here. It's always the one straight below the top stitch, but I have to go one stitch down further to make sure I'm in the right row. And of course I go up again for this one. Make sure that I'm making it even and symmetrical. But like I said before, if you're not too worried about the design, you can make it however you want. Alright, so the second one is done. Okay. So there we are, the top right. That's where we're starting. And we're going to want to go on this row, and it's going to be not that one, but this one. Right, go back up again and do the same thing for the double row. Alright, and then make sure you go to the same stitch, going down, the same row, the same column. Make sure you get that all, sorry, the same row, like same on this side and same along here as well. Alright, and one last doubling up. And go into that top left. Alright, so there is what it will look like. There. Okay, so the next step is we are going to sew it on. Actually, we'll get rid of the tail end before that. Okay, so now we're just going to get rid of this tail. We've done our accent here. And what we want to do is we want to tie it in, right? So what I do is I usually go into a stitch on this side here. You can go on either side, but I like this stitch right here because it's got a lot of pieces to it. I also like to make sure that my yarn is not going to show through. If you can see the shining of the needle, that shininess, you're going to probably see the yarn, especially when the color difference is so much. You want to be very careful how you're tying your ends in here. Now I need to bring my tail in a lot shorter because that is way too long at this point. There we are. Okay, so then there's a little bit of the loop left. I go in there and I tighten it. And then what I'm going to want to do, I'm going to turn it around just because it's easier. I'm going to want to go into a few of the very top flaps. Just a few of those. And again, I want to make sure I can't see my needle in there because I don't want to be able to see that yarn either. That is not something that I think would look very nice, right? And then I go the other way. I just miss one more stitch and I go back the other way. Back out. Again, I can't see it, so that is great. And this is all going to be in the back, so it's going to be hidden right against the toque, sewed right on, so you're not going to see it. Right, cut it off, so you don't need the yarn anymore. But what you're going to want to do, you're going to want to do the same thing for this very first stitch here. Right, so you've got to get the yarn on the needle. And try to find a stitch right there again. It's got a lot of, it's usually a decrease, not a decrease, but a first part of the stitch sometimes has several in a row like that. Right, and then you go through the loop and you just tighten. Right, make sure you don't tighten too much because you don't want this to curl, right? You don't want to pull it too tight so when it's laying flat, it's not going to properly lay flat because the yarn is too tight. Right, so then again I'll go into the top. Oh, lost my yarn. This is why I don't like working with short tails. I am always dropping the yarn. Right, so I go into a few stitches here. Cannot see it. And then I go back. Make sure you miss this one, otherwise the yarn's going to come straight through again. Got something to keep it there. There we are. Usually I'm not too concerned when I'm sewing my ends in. I'm not too concerned if you can see. Right, and you cut it off. I'm not too concerned if you can see the yarn needle through there because if it's the same color, you're never going to notice it. But this is quite a different color, so I always wanted to make sure that it's very much not going to be seen because that would just always pop out to me every time I would see it. Okay, next thing we are going to do is we are going to do the trim around the face that also goes around here in the same thread. Alright, so you're going to grab your hook back. I use the same size hook throughout the whole thing. And again, you want to tie your yarn onto your hook. Pull it over so that there's two over your forefinger. Pull the bottom one over the top one, and then the bottom one over the top one again, right over the edge of your finger. Slide your hook in, and tighten. Alright, so where we're going to want to start, I usually start right in this corner, right here. And you can see you're going to put a stitch in, one in the middle of each row, middle of this. When I say each row, it always looks like it's one row between these two, but these are actually two. I'm going to put one here and then one here and then one here, right? But as you go along, it's not a precise thing. I like to have it even so that the stitch looks very even, but it's not the end of the world if it's not absolutely perfect. Alright, so again we're going to put our hook in. We've already got one loop on the hook. We're going to put that hook in right over here. I keep my finger on here just to keep it here. Put it right on this top stitch. Go through, yarn over and pull through, and then yarn over and pull through both loops on the hook. And that's your first single crochet. So then you want to grab your tail, bring that around and put it right along the top of your work again. Okay, and then go into the next one. Sometimes it's a little bit tight, sometimes you kind of have to just force the hook in, but for the most part it works pretty good. Alright, and then you just line up single crocheting all the way around everywhere there's a stitch. And I just crochet in the string as well. Sometimes it takes a little work to make sure you keep it right on the top there, but it's better than sewing it in. Oh, missed my yarn there. And pull it through. After I've done a couple, excuse me, I have a little bit of a dry throat today. What I do is I tend to just cut the yarn off. This is just, you've already sewed, like crocheted this much of it in. It's going to stay there. Then you don't have to worry about the very tiny end. It's very hard to hold on to. Right? And you just continue with your single crochets. And it's not necessarily where you put it in, rather than an even amount of space between them is what makes it show up better. This is right in a corner area. So what I tend to do is I don't crochet right in the corner, I will crochet right there rather than over here or try to do this one little loop here. I want to have more than one string, right? I don't want to go here because that's much deeper than where I'm going here. So I'm going to go over here, and what that's going to do is that's actually going to pull it in nicely. And it'll have a softer corner. And this is where your chain stitches were. Let's see. I like to attach it more than to one string. My yarn is just attacking me all the time here. Not sure quite what is wrong with this yarn ball. It has just never come out of the yarn ball very well for this one. I'm not sure what happened. Alright, so we just continue to go in there. And the edging, it's not really an exact science. I just want to make sure that mine looks even, the stitches are equal distance apart, and that you're not going much further down. Like, you wouldn't want to pick a stitch in the next row because then that one would stick out quite a bit when it's a darker trim. That's really my only concerns when I'm doing the edging on these toques. Okay, so now we've reached the corner again, and I think I'm going to go straight for this one, because on the other side I did this stitch, but now I'm going to go this stitch because then it's going to pull it together again. Sometimes if you want to do both, it tends to want to kind of bow out a little bit because there's that much yarn bulking in the corner. I always tend to do one less stitch right in the corner. I don't do one or the other. Whichever one is going to help it pull together better, that's the one I tend to pick. And it tends to have a softer corner edge then, and it doesn't want to bow out. Okay, so we continue to single crochet right up the left side of the toque face opening. And you can kind of see the pattern coming to life. The little bits that you put on, the more and more you put on, the more and more you're seeing it kind of come to be like the picture. Or in my case, what I had in mind, what I had wanted it to do. Alright, so I'm at that very top stitch right now. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to continue to crochet right here. Right onto the ear flap. So I'm going to go onto that very first stitch here and just crochet in right there. Alright, and then just crochet it. You'll be viewing the back of the crochet stitches here as you're crocheting, but when you pull it back again, it'll have the trim and it'll have that look. I like the fact that it's the back end of the crochet stitch that you're seeing at this point, because it really does look like you flipped it back then. Alright. Okay, going until you get to the corner stitch. When you do the corner stitch, I tend to do 3 crochets in the same stitch. So then what that does is it rounds the corner and brings you up and gives you a nice soft corner. Alright, so then crochet along here, do the same thing in this corner here, and go right up into the end piece there, and that's where I will meet you. Okay, so we've done the trimming all the way around the top of the ear, or sorry, the forehead flap, but we started here, went all the way around, and then did that. Alright, so what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to slip stitch. Once we've done this last stitch here, on the bottom right of that forehead flap, we're going to want to go into your very first single stitch, and you're going to want to slip stitch through those top 2 loops. Alright, and then just pull right through. Of course, I make myself a fairly long tail just because I have issues with that. Alright, and then you flip your yarn through, pull it tight, and we are going to sew that right in, and you'll never be able to see it. Alright, we'll do that right now. Take our yarn needle, put the yarn on, and I like to do it on the inside because I find that when it pulls towards there, it's where it looks most hidden. If you want to pull it out here, I find that it's right out in the front, right? So, you just sew that in right along the single crochets that you had just finished to trim this face opening. And you pull it to the point where the knot just pulls below the top level there. Right, and then you crochet, or you have to sew the other way to hold it. Just make sure you're always missing one stitch or going back one stitch so that the yarn loop has something to hook onto while you're pulling it back. Right. There you are. Pull it out of the needle and just cut it. Okay. So now the face trimming part is done. So we can now sew it straight on to the toque. Alright. Okay, so for sewing it in, I'm going to use the same color, the taupe heather, because we're going to use it right along those top stitches there. It'll hide it. Right, so I do 2 to 3 feet worth of that yarn and I cut it off. And you're going to want to put it onto your needle again. Alright. Okay, so I usually like to place it on there, make sure that it's going straight up. You know, maybe not that it's going up at an angle, make sure you've got it straight. Very often you can tell if you're going along with the same kind of stitch on the top there. Alright, so I like to start right with the bottom just so that if there is any errors, it will, you can smooth it out as you're going, rather than if you start from here, well, first of all you're going to have to go down there and then go here and there, right? You're going to want to start from the bottom. It just works best. Make sure you have ice. Leave yourself a tail there that you can work with for sewing it in. And I went in the wrong stitch. Okay, let's try that again. I want to go right into the single crochet stitch that I had actually just done for the trimming. Okay, let's try that again. Leave yourself a tail for sewing in. And then I go in every stitch. Right, so I'm going to go into this one next. It just takes, oh, somehow my hand got in between there. I always find that the finishing bits are always the most awkward because there's always so much toque, especially in this style. It's a little awkward. Okay. And then you go on to the next one. Again, always making sure that it's looking the way you want it to look as you're sewing it up. And that you're not having your tail tangled because you're going to need that later on. Okay, try to hold that off to the side. Okay, so then we go into the next single crochet up, that space right there. Okay, go one up. And that is the basic idea of sewing it in. You just go into each stitch, makes it the strongest that way. Kids won't make them rip off very easily then, because you know, if there's something to pull or yank on and twist and flip around, they're gonna try it. At least I know my nephews do. Alright, so then go into the next stitch above, and that's pretty much what it is. So make sure you're holding it still. If you want to pin it in place, feel free to do that, just be careful for the pointy ends. And sew it in all the way along that top edge right to the bottom here, and that's where I will meet up with you. Okay, we're on the last stitch now, attaching the forehead flap to the toque. So I've just come into the second last stitch, and I'm going to just sew into that very last stitch. Of course I have extra yarn, but I'm always paranoid on having a little bit of yarn. I don't know what that is, but I'd rather have too much than too little. Okay, so then it's all sewn in. It's going to stay in there. You can wash this, it will stay. Okay, so now we're going to go into the inside of the toque. Right, I'm going to grab my needle that I put in there and grab the top of the toque and pull it all inside out. We can just quickly do some, we're going to do the top of the toque, put that tail in, but for now we're going to do this one first. And I like to do it all underneath in this area because, like right in this area, because it's all covered by the front, right? But I want to make sure that there's not going to be anything sticking up, like a knot or anything like that. When I'm making a knot, I like to make sure it hides underneath the stitch, because you just don't want that poking on the forehead, right? Okay, so I am going to go in this one right here. And the best you can, you want to hide the knot. Sometimes it's not always possible. I'm going to pull that way, and then I'm going to go into these stitches right here and get it a good chunk that way. And then it pulls nice and flat there. And then pull back. You don't want to pull too tight because it's going to want to curl up there, right? And cut it off. Alright, so now we want to do the same thing on this side. Okay. First of all, we want to knot it in. Go to this first there. Go in through your loop and tighten. Alright, see now this one, if I were to go straight back this way, I'd want to pull that way. So I'm going to go up a row, and that helps hide it a little bit better. There we are. Pulls flat. You can see a little bit more of it than you can on this side, but it pulls nice and flat. Alright, then you go back. Okay, and cut off the end. Alright, so those are all sewn in. Off to the side. Now we're going to sew on our very top tail. You could do this earlier at any point, it's just I've got the toque inside out now, so now I do it. Okay. And I usually find out kind of which direction it's coming from, and then I go in through the main circle. Sometimes it's a little bit of a struggle to get in there. And it's not wanting to let me. Maybe it's just the angle. Okay. There we are. Sometimes it's just such tight stitches on the top there that it doesn't want to let you get in there. Alright, and then we're going to back stitch. If it's going to let us. Yikes! It's been a while since I've had one this snug where it just does not want to let me in. And this way it would be easier if you had a sharpened edge, most definitely. It's just, usually my thumbs are very close to the edge that I'm working with, like to the yarn, to the needle. And the last thing I want is to slam the needle up underneath my thumb. So there. It was a lot more difficult than what any toque has been in a very long while, but then you know, the snugger it is, the tighter it stays. Okay, so I've flipped the toque back outside right, or back, the outside is the correct outside facing way. And the next step we're going to do is we are going to put the trim all the way around the edge. Okay, so what I like to do is I like to start in the back. You always want to make sure that the head is pointing towards you. You're going to grab your hook back again, and of course it's still going to be in the taupe heather. And you wrap it so you've got two around your finger, top one over the bottom one, top one over the bottom one, and put your hook in. Okay, so we're going to join in here. Anywhere you should just do some around the middle, doesn't really matter. Stick the hook in, make sure you're holding this one here so that this knot doesn't want to come to the front. Yarn over and pull through, yarn over and pull through both. There's your first single crochet, grab your tail, put it along the top of your work, and then crochet that tail into the top there. Alright. At this point, that's what I'm going to cut off this tail. There we are. And then it's just back to regular single crochets all the way around, just as if you're adding another layer to the end of the toque at this point. Just straightforward single crocheting. Oops. I'm really liking the color contrast between these two colors. It's kind of like a very grayish brown against the bright pop of the carrot color. I think it's just a very nice combo. Alright, so remember I said I don't usually do the corner stitch? That applies here as well. If I did this, it wouldn't want to lay, like it would always want to be pushing out, it wouldn't want to pull in, right? It is very rare that I will stitch right into the corner stitch. Instead I will go into the first stitch on the side beginning of the angled piece. Alright, so then you go into the next one. You kind of find the spaces that work, right? And this one has a bigger space, so it's easier to find that one. But you kind of find what works for you as you go along. And of course, edging is never about counting stitches, at least not for pretty much most of my toques. It's more just about having a nice trim. I'll always trim off my toques. Sometimes it'll be the same color as the toque main color, or sometimes it's a contrast color like this one. And it entirely depends on the design that I'm going for, or the specifications from the client, what they request. Right, so we're getting close to that end. Close to the tip there. And like I say, I still haven't cut that off. I'm going to just crochet it right in. Okay, so that is my edge stitch right there. So I'm going to put 3 in that one, even though it's not a full 90 or full corner as it was up on top here. I did the 3 stitches there. I do the 3 here anyway. I like a full corner stitch. I don't like having gaps between my stitches there. But again, it depends on the style that you're going for, right? And then you just crochet along the top stitches here. And then you've got another corner right away. And at this point, make sure that you're holding your yarn there. And I put 3 in the same stitch. Hides it quite well. And go on to your next stitches all the way down. So you're going to do the exact same thing, crocheting this in as you go. Of course, this does not need to be this long. I can trim this off. But yeah, you just crochet it in as you go and trim it once it gets kind of really to the short point. And then make sure you don't do the corner stitch in this one again. Make sure you go to the first loop onto the toque rather than like from this last stitch on the chest piece, go to the first unused crochet, unused stitch on the toque rather than going into the corner. It'll pull nice and tight in that way. And you keep on going all the way around until you're to the last stitch there, and I'll meet you at that point. Okay, so now we have finished all of our single crochets all the way around, and we just need to slip stitch these 2 together. So you'll go into your first single crochet right on the top 2 loops, yarn over, pull through, and then pull through the hook. And then cut your yarn, and you can just pull it right through, pull the yarn, and it will knot up. Alright, so you grab your yarn needle, put it through the hook. Again, always go in the back. Okay. You don't want to pull it too tight so that it's going to have this dip there, but at the same time you want the knot to kind of just flow a little bit back. Alright, and then you sew back towards where you started from. Right, there you are. And cut your yarn. Alright, so we are getting there. So this is what it looks like at this point. You've got your trim, which helped it stay nice and flat. It helped it lay flat, rather than curling up and going down and over. Alright. And right over in the back too, you can't even really tell where you joined in. And then up here, all that is done and trimmed. The only thing left is to attach the ears. Alright, so we will be creating the ears in the next clip. Okay, so now we are going to start on the ears. Of course, you're going to make 2 of these, and they are going to look like this when we are done with the first part of it. It is just a basic kind of very, very tiny little mini toque. And then when we pull it forward, it kind of curls in like that, and it looks like an ear, and we'll add the fur just on the back side later on. Okay, so that's a goal for the first step here. So we need to get our chain on the hook, our loop on the hook, same as we've done in the past. Alright, and rather than starting off with a magic circle, I'm going to start off with 4 chains, because I'm not concerned with the hole at the top. Alright, and then once you've got 4 chains, slip stitch into this very first chain, yarn over, pull through, and pull through the one that was on your hook already. Alright, then you chain 1. That just brings it up to the height of a single crochet that you're going to be doing. It's a little awkward, but you want to kind of crochet this end in as you're going, just like you were on the trimming of the toque. And what we want to do is we want to single crochet into that little middle circle right there. It's a little hard to see in the first one, but the more you put in, the more obvious it'll be. Alright, so we go in there, yarn over, pull through, and single crochet. What I'm going to do in this one is I am going to mark my stitch. This is the very first one of the round. Right, and then we're going to do 7 more for a total of 8, all in the same middle piece. So we've got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So you can see that there's going to be much bigger of an opening in the top there. This is what would happen if I would start my toques this way, and I don't want that big of a hole on my toques, but at the top of my toques. But this is just for an ear. It's going to kind of fold over anyway, and it's not going to be noticeable. Plus, we're going to be putting that the faux fur finishing on it as well. Okay, so we've done 8 single crochets. We pull our tail to the back, and then we're going to want to single crochet into this stitch right here. Okay, there you are. And then you mark your stitch marker back in there again. And we're going to put 2 single crochets in each stitch around. So we're going to go from a total of 8 stitches to a total of 16 stitches. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, last one, 15, and 16. Okay. Excuse me. Alright, so now we're back up to our first stitch again. And we're going to do 1 single stitch all the way around in each stitch, so we're going to stay at 16 stitches. That's the first one. Replace the stitch marker. Two, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. Okay, so for the next round, we are going to do a slight increase, and it's going to be 1 single crochet in the first stitch and then 2 single crochets in the second stitch, and we're going to repeat that pattern all the way around. So in the first stitch, we only do 1 single crochet. We replace our marker. But in the second stitch, we are doing 2 crochets in this stitch, 2 single crochets, and then 1 single crochet in the stitch, and then 2 of them in the next stitch. And we're going to continue this pattern all the way around. It's a little awkward because it's very tight and it's wanting to curl. But that is a good thing. That is what it's supposed to be doing. The stitch marker, it gets in the way quite a bit more on these, but it's worth it to know where to start and end on these small awkward ears. Okay, we're on the last set now, so there's one single crochet and 2 of them in the last one. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do 1 single crochet in every stitch around. There's going to be no more increases, and we're going to do that for 5 rounds. So once you've finished 5 rounds of single crochets in every stitch, then I'll meet up with you then. Okay, so now you can see that it has turned into what I showed you before. So for our last stitch, we can take out the stitch marker. We no longer need it. We are going to go in there, yarn over, pull through, pull right through the one on the hook, and then 1 more slip stitch right through. And then I've cut off a nice long piece of the yarn. A nice long tail, because what I use this tail for is actually to sew it onto the toque. So give yourself a nice long tail, and you can see when you kind of curve it in like that, it'll look like an ear, especially when you add the fur on the edge here and all along the back. It'll look like a furry ear. Okay, so our next step is that we want to add that in. We want to make sure that your tail is on the right hand side, because that means your longest edge is in the front and your ear will sit properly on the toque. If you put it this way, this one is a little bit shorter than the other ones and your ears are going to want to fall forward. Okay. So this part is time consuming. I will tell you that. I tried many different ways of using this yarn. I already had this yarn and I really, really liked it for the furry aspect of the ears, because it was very gentle, it was soft, it was the color I needed, and I actually already had it. I didn't have to buy extra yarn. So if you can find a different yarn that would work better for you, or if you already have a different type of yarn that you think would provide a fuzzy ear look in your stash already, by all means, go ahead and use it. This one leaves lots of little pieces around for a little bit, but a good vacuuming and it's all cleared up. Okay, so like I said, this is time consuming, this part. So what I do is I kind of stretched out. I figured out I needed about this much for each. I cut it off. I'm using a smaller yarn, a smaller crochet hook. This one is 3.5 rather than the 5 that I was using before. I just find it easier to go in to these stitches with a smaller hook. Don't have to use one, but I found it was easier. So what I do is I start on the bottom, usually do upside down, and I note that this is where the edge will be. So I put my hook in there. I fold this over my finger, so I'm holding the 2 ends on the other side of my finger. Put it over the hook. I pull them both through, put them both over the hook, and yarn them both through, and I tighten. Right. Like I said, it is very time consuming. You don't necessarily, I guess, have to put it in every stitch, but for me I wanted a really furry look, so I did it in every stitch, but only along the back, right? Just on the edge here, and then the back, and right over the top. So this hole here, it's completely covered. You don't even have to worry about it. But if you're not wanting to have the furry ears, you can leave it at this point as well and sew this, skip to the point where I sew it onto the toque. Alright, so I'll show you a few more of these. Right. Try to keep them somewhat the same so that they're somewhat even. Cut it off. I'll put it on my finger and hold it between these 2 fingers until I can get it on my hook. And then pull it through. Then yarn both of them over and pull it through the loop. At some point the art is in not pulling the previous loops through, but if you pull them away and kind of hold them underneath your hand, it does help. But it does get a little awkward and difficult at times, but you'll never see the stitches in something like this and using a yarn like this. I tried initially trying to crochet it along with when I was making the actual ear, just doing the double yarn stitch, one of these and one of these. These ones just go all flat then. They stay all flat and almost none of the furry shows through. So that one didn't work. I tried several different ways and finally I decided, okay, I'm going to have to do this the long way. So if someone else has figured out a way to do this and have the same result and have less time consuming, definitely please tell me. I am always willing to learn new ways of doing things. Right, so you pull it through, yarn both pieces over, and pull that through the loop. Right, and you tighten it. So you're going to do that on all stitches in the whole back piece, and I'll make sure you go just a little bit onto the front edge here. Alright, so have fun doing that. Like I said, this particular yarn leaves these little pieces everywhere, so in this way I can just kind of keep them all on the table, and what I use is packing tape, and I just clean it up with packing tape. It's the easiest thing, because if you try to sweep them up, they just blow all over the place, and you never quite get them all. It's like the little pieces of a Christmas tree. You never quite get them all. They still show up in the middle of summer. So I find packing tape works the best for cleaning those up. Okay, so you can go ahead and work on getting all these ear fuzzies done. If you don't want to do the bottom row, the absolute bottom row, that is fine too, because you'll be using that to sew it in and you won't be able to see that round. So you could start on the second level here and save yourself all those stitches. Alright, we will see you once you're done with making your ears furry. Okay, so the fur is on both of our ears now. I've made 2 of them. I love that they look so scraggly. Like, it's the look that I personally was going for, to have just a really kind of messy kind of ear, because they seem to have a kind of wild fur, the Ewoks in the movies, so that was something that I was going for. But yeah, so these are my ears. Of course you can see the stitching on the front here, that's the inside of the ear. And when you flip over to the back, they're nice and furry. And of course they each have a very long tail at the end. This one is not very long. I'm hoping it'll be long enough, but yeah, so that's what they look like when they're done. If you use a different type of yarn to add the furry effect, then of course yours will look a little bit different. But the next step is we are going to attach them on to the actual toque now. Alright, so we'll bring the toque in, and what I've done is I've marked 2 spots just with 2 bobby pins. The way I did that is I placed the ear right on there. I decided where I wanted it to be. I wanted it to be kind of, you know, off on the side, so at the middle of the ear would kind of be off at an angle from the corner of the forehead flap. So I placed it there first, and then I marked the first bobby pin just by going in through 1 stitch like that. This way, if you put them in backwards, they stick out quite a bit. As you're sewing it on, it is difficult to hold on to, and you also want to make sure that you're ending up in the right spot, because if you're not careful, it could be going way forward or way back, and then to undo it. It's not impossible, but it does take time, and it's a little frustrating. So that's what I do. I tend to just place the markers here so I know where I'm sewing towards as I'm sewing the ear on. But of course the tail end is on this end, so I'm actually going to start here and go up towards the top for this side. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to need the yarn needle. And we are going to put the yarn through the eyelet. And since this is the very first stitch, what I'm going to do, I'm going to just make sure. Sometimes it's a little difficult just because of the fur, right? So you can pull it aside and see exactly. looks like I will need to go exactly into the stitch. It won't be the one above it. I'll need to go exactly into the stitch where it is. So I'm going to remove this bobby pin because this is where I'm starting. And I know I want to go into this stitch right here. Alright, so I'm going to go through, and then the tail is going to come towards me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that this is centered, and I am going to go through the front loop, this front stitch right here. It doesn't have to be exact. You won't be able to tell if you're not exactly into one stitch, but I always try to do my best. And then I'm going to go through and go to the one behind it. Right? And as you tighten it, it'll pull towards the toque. Right? So then you're in the back. You want to go into that next stitch right above it. Right? Go forward. And the ear does flop quite a bit around at first, simply because there's not very much sewn on. So the ear does have that curve to it, right? So you want to make sure you maintain a little bit of the curve. You don't want to do a straight stitch right across, otherwise the ear will be like this. It'll be very straight, and sometimes it wants to kind of flop over a little bit when it does that. So I like to give just a little bit of curve to maintain an ear look, right? Because the ears are always kind of curved towards, like the dome towards the front. Right, so now we need to go through the next stitch. Go right through, but just make sure that you are catching the back end as well. All right, make sure you catch a stitch in the back. There you are. So you pull, and you'll be able to tell it's pulling in tight again. I pull it in fairly tight because I don't want the ears to be loose or wobbly in any way, right? So still maintaining that edge point right to this bobby pin here. I realize I need to go in right there. That would be my next stitch. Go back here and I see that I've got some yarn in there as well. So you go forward, pull tight, and of course you want to go into that stitch there. And very often it doesn't catch a back piece or back part of the ear. So then you want to make sure that you are catching a stitch in the back. Right, there you are. Right. So then every stitch I try to make sure that I'm still lining up the edge of this ear to my bobby pin right here. So I kind of pin the yarn down on the toque, and I realize the next stitch that I need to go to is in that area. Okay, so I go through. Like, you will pull yarn through, like mostly it's just the furry bit that kind of comes through, which is all good. If it shows too much, you can trim it off at the end. It's all very easily done, right? Because you can see some of the fur coming through. Go into the stitch above it, pull back, make sure that you're catching a back end stitch of the toque, which I am. Right. And pull tight. Okay, so we're matching up to the bobby pin again. We're getting to the curved spot, right? So we want to make sure that we're doing this correctly. Keep the curve in the toque. Alright, so there we are. Going through the back on that one, to the front. Tie it nice and tight. And go in through the stitch above it, and make sure you catch a stitch in the back. Okay. Pull nice and tight. And again, matching up to this point of the bobby pin right here. thinking the next stitch is going to have to be right there, because the last one was there. We're going to go into this one right here. Need to go through the front and make sure you catch the back as well. And pull tight. And see, like it's not an absolute perfection. You want to get as close as you can to this bobby pin, right? So then the next stitch is going to be right there. Pull nice and tight. Go into the stitch above it. Right, make sure you catch part of the back. Sometimes it's really hard to see. Well, there you can see that's the end. You just want to make sure, otherwise there's going to be a loose bit in the back of your ear and it won't be tied on securely. Right, matching up again right there. So the next stitch we're going to want to do is right there. And we are going to go into this stitch right here. Make sure we catch part of the bottom of the back right over there. Yes, there we are. Sometimes it's really difficult to see that. Right, so you pull tight. There you are in the front. There, it looks like we're meeting exactly that same stitch. It's good to see. All right, the next one, we're going to have just 2 more stitches left. So here we are, go to the front. And through to the back. Tighten nice and tight. And the last stitch, we're actually going to use exactly where that bobby pin is. We're in the stitch right there. It's in the same. Alright, so we're in that very last stitch. We had just pulled through from the back to the front. And now this going to the front to the back, right on the edge, the last stitch right there. Make sure you catch that back piece. There you are. And then you can take the bobby pin out at this point because I don't want it getting stuck in there and getting it more difficult to take out. Alright, so then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through that same, not the same stitch, but the one just to the side of it, because I want to pull it further this way rather than pulling it further this way. Right. And then, but in the front, I'm going to go into the same stitch. Go through the back. Right. Since I've gone through one of the furry yarn stitches, I'll just release that. You can see it is right on my yarn, which is fine. Okay, so as I tighten that, see it's just a tiny stitch, but once it's tightened, you won't see it at all. Okay, so to tie this off, I actually pull the furry yarn away, and I go into the stitch above there in order to create a knot. Make sure I'm pulling nice and tight on this one because that's what's holding the ear on. Right. Pulling that into a knot. You can see it's stayed nice and tight. And then I'm going to sew it into the bottom of the ear here. See, a lot of the fur, the faux fur yarn is in there, but you know what, that's fine too because you don't want to necessarily have a definite line all the time, right? Not in regards to something like this. So I'm just pulling my yarn through one way, and then I'm going to go a little bit further back so that I know it'll have some yarn to hook onto, so it won't just pull right through, and go back to the edge there. Right, Pull my needle off. See, and then that is the ear when it is on. The first ear. Like I said, these little ones at first, they just really shed. Alright, so then that's the first ear. If they have it on, that's their first ear. Kind of does a little bit forward, but stays straight. Alright, so now we are going to trim our end piece. Okay, so then we're going to do the exact same thing for the other side. We're going to do the pins, and we're going to match it so that the ears look even. What I do is I look at it from the front, see how far the ear came down on the side. Oh, sorry, I don't know if you can see that on screen there, but I measure to make sure they're going to the same level on the side. Also, how many rows from that center circle. Right? And then you look at it from straight above as well to make sure that the angle is the same, right? Because it could be on the same row down over here, but you could have it further forward, right? So you want to make sure that the angle of the ear is correct. And once you have that, you mark your 2 bobby pins on either end as to where you want to start and where you want to end. And you sew it on exactly the same way as you sew this on, right? And I will see you once we have both ears sewn on. Okay, congratulations to you. You have finished the toque. This is a little bit of a time-intensive toque, but I absolutely love the design. I love the way it turned out. So this is the Star Wars Ewok toque complete. This is the way mine looks. If you've used a different yarn or colors, of course yours will look different, but this is the original design. You've got your ears, which stand up nice and are nice and even and centered. Right, to the ear, the forehead flap, the face opening, and then all the way through to the chest cover piece, right? And in the back, there's really not much happening on the back, but it's the way the ears, I love that the ears are so furry in the back. That's just, I just love the way that turned out. Okay, so then you go through, then right to the trim piece. There you are, so it is done. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial on the Star Wars Ewok toque design that I've made. And I would be very grateful if you would like this video, and even more grateful if you would subscribe to my channel for further tutorials on my other toque designs and also future toque designs that I make. So I look forward to hearing from you if you liked this or if you had any comments or suggestions. I'm always open to hearing those. So if you could mark those down in the comments, that would be awesome. Alright, thank you very much.